everyone, and welcome back to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is an author making their official debut here on the show. Now, my guest today is an award-winning author who has always been a storyteller at heart. Even if life took her on a few detours before she found her way to the page. After a rewarding career as a special education's preschool teacher, she's now living her dream as an author. She writes emotionally resonant women's fiction with heartfelt stories that explores complex relationships, layered characters, and the quiet moments that shape who we've become. In addition to her novels, she has published poetry and short stories in various anthologies. And when she's not writing, she can be found out in nature, flowing through yoga, or cozied up on the couch with a cup of tea, a good book, and her two cats vying for lap space. She lives in Connecticut with her husband and two children who inspire her every day. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause to our guest today, award-winning author Wendy Haller. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm really excited for our chat today.
Same here, Wendy. Same here. I am so excited to have you here on the show. And before we dive in, I like asking this little icebreaker question for all of my guests. What's a random fact about you that not a lot of people know?
I have worked 2 Olympic Games for NBC Sports, the one in Australia and the one in Salt Lake City. And while in Australia, I got the chance to walk across the top of the bridge next to the Sydney Opera House, which is very cool. So
wow, that is really amazing.
Yeah, that was my first career.
Nice. Very, very nice. And of course, everyone who's been following Wendy on her social media, which I'll provide the link down below, Wendy's most recent book came out this weekend, and she's doing all kinds of promotion to talk about it. Now, Wendy, without spoiling too much for those who may not have read the second book, what can people expect from this next one in this trilogy of yours?
So with my Flanagan Girls trilogy, each book is told from each sister's perspective of how they grew up and how it influences them in adulthood. So the first one, the Flanagan Girls, was the youngest sister's perspective. With Regret No More, this is the oldest sister, Becca. And really this book, the main theme or thread through the book is about that healing journey of the mother-daughter relationship from adolescence to adulthood, where the child begins to see the parent as a person more than just mom, but also as a person. And then also the mother reflects on some of the choices she made as a parent and, kind of honors the fact that they weren't always the best, and it's really about that their journey together, coming to terms with, they had a big break in their relationship that's mentioned in the first book, but it really goes back a little bit in time in the second book to understand where the relationship healed and how they got to that healing point.
Nice. Very, very nice. Now, is this like modern contemporary fiction? Is it a little bit of historical?
No, it's modern contemporary. So the first book takes place in 2023 because we're going back to understand the healing of the relationship. It takes place back in 2007, but it's modern.
Okay, nice. Very, very nice. Now, before we dive further into the Flanagan Girls trilogy, let's talk a little bit more about you, Wendy. So, from your bio, one of your other jobs was, a former special education's preschool teacher for many years. And I'm very curious, where in your life did you sort of like rediscover that passion for the written word? What was that aha or series of aha moments that got you back to writing?
Well, I've always written. I was a journalism major. I wrote throughout college for my college newspaper and our literary magazine. And poetry, some people write in diaries or a journal. poetry was always my outlet. That is how I would express my experiences, my observations of the world, was writing poems. And so I've always done that through the years. I wrote short stories and prose and whatnot. And a lot of it in college and a little bit after, I had published in anthologies and independently. But then, life happens as it does. I had kids and, got married, had kids, and I was, teaching. But for me, the writing was always there, just putting it out in the world was not. And it really was my son, when I had to leave my position as an early childhood special educator due to a chronic illness. And my son, my son who was going off to college found the silver lining. He's like, Mom, this is your time. So he was the one that basically said, I want you to write and I don't want you to stop writing. And then after, I had a little pity party because I thought I was going to retire as a teacher. But who knew that this dream that I'd always had of writing a novel and publishing a book, because I'd written short form for so long, just to prove to myself that I could write long form. And that was really, my son almost kind of gave me permission to just go for it. He gave me that little extra shove, and my husband and my daughter were very supportive as well. And I had the time now, and it was kind of, the first book I published was a book of poetry. And then once that was published, which I self-published it was like a floodgate open. And it's like, I can't stop writing now. And again, time also helps. But yeah, it was really, I'd say, the push of my son to put my work out there that really made it happen.
That's awesome, Wendy. That is absolutely incredible. So now let's talk about your writing career as a whole. Now, as you mentioned just now, that you were also a journalist by trade back in your university years. And and then also you've written poetry and short stories as well as, publishing in various anthologies. So for each of your bodies of work, whether it's poetry, short stories, and of course the Flanagan Girls trilogy, what really surprised you about your unique style of writing as you began, showcasing your different bodies of work?
I think the emotional depth that I write sometimes surprises me. And what I mean by that is, there's the show don't tell part of being a writer. I write dialogue. I am very good. That is a strong point of mine, is writing dialogue, because I really enjoy delving deep into the emotional layers and the relationships that people have. So when I started writing my novel, I told through my whole first draft, I just pretty much wrote dialogue. And then the second draft, I went in, and that's when I started to do a lot of the description. But I would say definitely the relatability of my characters as being flawed, raw people that you would be. I'm an observer. I'm a people watcher. I love to observe what's happening around me. And I'm also an empath, so I feel big. So I think a lot of that translates into my stories, my characters, that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And now fast forwarding to the Flanagan Girls trilogy, as we began writing with, book one and now the release of book two, what was sort of the goal you had for this trilogy? And ultimately, what is the promise you're making, not just to yourself as the author, but also fans of the genre?
I think the overall impact I'm hoping for myself and for my readers is, one, to be seen. I would love for, with all of my work, even my contemporary romance novel, I want whoever reads it to find someone that, like, a character they can relate to, or if they've gone through that experience, to feel seen, represented. I do a lot of research. I do a lot of interviews before I write my books. But Also, it just shows, I have like a saying that I say a lot, that is, embrace the journey. You never know where it will lead. And I think that's the big part of my book, is showing all the different stages that we go through in our lives, the chapters, if you will, that we go through, and how we continue to evolve and grow.
Absolutely.
And that's what the Flanagan Girls trilogy especially shows, how the girls have grown. They grew up together in this house lacking in love, where the parents put the food on the table, roof over their head, but there wasn't a lot of love shown. So they really had to bond together to care for one another. But as we do, we grow up, we go off in the world, and we try to figure out our lives and who we are and where do we belong in this world. And then when the girls are adults, it's really them finding themselves back to each other, more than just sisters, but now as friends, and creating
Mm,
that different relationship. And so each book, yes, each book is each sister's story. They all interweave, as life does, but it's really taking you through the stages of their lives, and to see the growth, and how, we're not finished when we become adults. We're not finished. We keep evolving. And I really feel like right now, for me in my 50s, I'm becoming a version of myself, especially as a writer, which had always been a dream, a novelist, so to speak, that had always been a dream of mine, that I really never vocalized to anybody, because I didn't know it could be true. And now here am I in my 50s, and it's happened. And I'm like, I'm finally stepping into a version of myself that I'd wanted for so long. And I think
absolutely.
that's something that my readers and myself can get from the stories I write, because that's what I want to convey.
Absolutely. Well said, Wendy. Well said. We're now actually going to change things up a little bit with this question, which is a fan question. Now, normally I say this towards the end when we get to the business side, but I think this would fit really nicely here.
Okay.
And I love asking this fan question to authors because I think your book really fits well with this. And it's this notion of adaptation to other media. And this fan question asks, if your book was adapted into a movie or a series, which actress or actor would you like to play the main lead?
Oh my goodness. I can honestly say I never even thought of it, because I'm such a visual learner. I make storyboards for all of my books. And so I have a picture printed out already of the sisters that I've had on my storyboard. My husband thinks of it like, like Law and Order SVU, with the murder board and all the things. I have that for all my novels. I plot them out that visually. So I have a picture in my head. But gosh, Becca, who is the eldest, isn't that terrible? I don't even know. And I should know this. My son is a cinephile. He's a film major. I know I am a movie buff. Who would I want to play? I don't know. Can we skip it and come back? Can I think about it?
Okay, of course, of
He's
course.
not terrible.
It's a tough fan question, and a lot of authors have struggled on this one because, you know, our books are very, no matter what genre you're writing, they do have that cinematic feel that it could be a film or a TV show. So yes, we'll absolutely come back to
Well,
this
and I
question.
do see that. I can see that. Like when I am at my author events and my markets that I do, I compare my books, or especially the Flanagan Girls, to Virgin River, to Sweet Magnolias, to This Is Us, because they're family dramas, they're, family sagas. And I like, I'm kind of an underdog person. I like the underdog. Even if my team is in the, a Super Bowl, I still kind of feel for the other team. Like I'm like, I want my team to win, but I kind of want yours, because I don't want any, hard feelings. But anyways,
Right.
same thing for actors and actresses. If my books were turned into a series, I would want someone that wasn't popular.
So an unknown kind of.
I would want an unknown. My son did his senior thesis last night. There was an amazing actress, Serena. I'm blanking on her last name right now, but she was amazing in it. Like someone like her that has so much raw talent that hasn't been tapped into yet. I would love that.
All right, nice,
So
very
there's
very
my
nice.
answer.
Nice. And kind of in the same line of characters, this one I think would be a little bit easier. May not too much border on spoilers, but we'll see. Now,
Okay.
of the sisters, which one was the easiest to flesh out? And which sister is probably the one that caused you the most grief?
The one I would say the oldest one, she's very complex, but I have found her to be the most enjoyable to write because of the strength in her. The youngest, Claire, would probably fall second, I guess. She's a little bit. She was a part of me when I was younger. The next book I'm writing, which is Lainey, the middle sister, I already have the book plotted out. I just planned out. I just have some more research to do before I write it. I'm finding her to be the most complex. The name of the book is On Her Own Terms. And Lainey lives life on her own terms. And she is a no nonsense, tells it like it is, and it's very different than me in a certain way, where I have to channel a personality that's braver than I ever was at her age, that just has this presence about her that is just very different. Yeah, I think she would be my hardest because I really want to convey what I see. You know how it is as a writer, what I see in my head of who she is. I want to make sure I can convey that on the page. And that's why I'm not ready to write it yet, because I'm not there yet. I feel like I need to do a little more research. I'm interviewing a bunch of different people who are the middle sibling. And I think I'll be able to hone in on the intricacies of who Lainey is once I finish those interviews.
Absolutely, 100%. And as also mentioned in your bio, Wendy, you love crafting very complex characters, very rich in like emotions and relationship with not just themselves, but with other characters that they interact with. So I'm very curious, as an author, how do you write characters that do have that believability and authenticity in an age where some characters may be written just for thematic effect or tropes?
Yeah. Well, each one of my books has a character that there's an Aunt Viv who's like the crazy fun aunt that you never know what's going to expect. And then in Regret No More, it's Diana Fontanella, who's a Italian lawyer that, long red nails, big blonde hair. So I like to almost write those kind of characters that fill the expected trope of, the crazy aunt or the second chance at something, I like to have that little the underlying storyline of what readers look for. And they like a character that can almost be that comic relief, or that I know someone like that in my life, or I have that aunt, or that kind of, or I had that mother-in-law, like in Regret No More, there's a mother-in-law that's very passive aggressive for Claire, and or someone in their life that's like that. And it's just fun to have that other character in there.
Very true. Very, very true. And this is actually another fan question I actually got earlier this week. And I think this is a very important one because we don't talk about it as much as authors. And it is that notion of types of characters that we do struggle with. Now, you did mention before there was one of the sisters that you do struggle with, or will be a struggle when you get to that character. But the one character for me, and there's like a type, is children or young adults.
Hmm.
And for my book, most recent book, Decimus the Wolf of Rome, my main character is a father and he has a son. I struggled with writing that character because I don't know how to write a 10-year-old and have him speak like a 10-year
Yeah.
old. It is such a nightmare. So, Wendy, I would like to hear your thoughts on, from your own experience of, not just the Flanagan Girls, but your other stories. What types of characters do you think a lot of authors struggle with that readers or viewers may not think of as being too difficult to write? The one that get most common from authors is children. That those are the types of characters that are often a nightmare to write because we don't know how to write believable children. Some maybe better than others. Some struggle.
It's interesting. I think I don't have a problem writing children, but I think maybe that's because I was a teacher for so long and I was around children, even though I taught preschool. I taught fourth grade for 1 year. I student taught in first grade. I was in an elementary school. I have two children. So even in my first, or in Flanagan Girls, Claire has three kids that are 4, 8, and 12. And so that never, writing children isn't for me. For me, it's writing men.
Okay.
And the struggle, especially going into the next book I'm writing, is I don't want to fall into the stereotype of he's a, from this day forward, the main character Jay is a police officer. Oh, he's a macho police officer, and 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 not humanize him. Like, I don't want
Right.
to fall into the stereotype of what people, or what has been written or is thought of as a policeman. He's still a human, and so showing the human side of him, and the same thing with Claire's husband, Patrick. When I wrote him, he has to start traveling for work. And one of my readers said, "Thank you so much for making him not a cheater. I'm so glad Patrick didn't have an affair." And I'm like, that's exactly, why do we have to? Like, why, just because he travels for work, like, that's too easy.
Mm.
It's too easy to make the police officer the closed off, non-emotional, strong man that can take care of everybody. And and the same thing for Patrick. For him, oh, he's traveling for work, he's going to get hit on by a woman, or he's going to and he's going to stray. And then in the next book, Mark, the husband, he and Lainey grow up together. They have a baby in their early 20s, and this book takes place over three acts: act 1, act 2, act 2, then or act 3, them in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, and it's them growing up together. But I don't need to make him a bad guy. I need to make him a real guy
Right.
who is just trying to figure life out. So I think for me, that is important, as is just as important. Yes, I write women's fiction. The majority of my readers are women, but I still want to represent the men in their lives and not fall into the stereotype. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And you're actually the second author that has mentioned that too, which I
Really?
think is very important because you're absolutely right. When, regardless of whatever genre that you write in, it is very easy to fall into the tropes or the cliques or the cliches or the stereotypes. And while some
Yes.
people may enjoy that, absolutely, everyone wants something different. They want something that's, a little bit more, I don't say gravitas, but it's believability, that it doesn't always have to fall onto the cliche. And I'm actually glad that you're bringing that up because that is something that we're going to be touching on, especially when we get into the business side of being an
Mhm.
author. Now, this next question kind of borders on, a little bit of reflective side. And the reason I bring up this question, Wendy, is I've been doing this show now for about like 8 years. I began during like the height of COVID, and initially this podcast was just, connecting with my local friends in the US. But it's since, expanded and broadened into, this glorious thing. And this question in particular, I like hearing the answer to this because this notion of authors, we're very solitary people in the
Yeah.
sense of, it is a very lonely experience. Sometimes it may not be such a rewarding experience, and there is no guarantee that our books are going to be well known or recognized, but we still do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I asked this question because a lot of people who've answered it, they've said that they never told their friends and family that they were authors until their books were published or they were getting traction. But in other cases, they did. And it also
Hmm.
comes down to the notion of how we publish. Indie publishing, self publishing has been on the rise for the last few years. Yet, despite that, there's still that stigmatism, that stereotype that indie publishing, self publishing, small press, or even hybrid is
Yeah.
seen as a lesser form of publication because, people still believe that traditional publishing is, the gold star standard. And it is. It is still the standard for, the longest time. They have
Yeah.
paid their dues. But indie authors are at the point where you can't even tell that person is, professionally published or self-published because the quality has gotten so good because readers
Yes.
expect that same
Expect it.
quality.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that stigmatism does still exist. So ultimately, Wendy, my question to you is this. When did you feel confident in your abilities to say that, you know what, I am a writer, I am an author? And I know you mentioned earlier before that, your family has been very, very supportive. But when did you tell, like, maybe your extended family or maybe even your friends that you were embarking on this new journey? And what has the reaction been like?
Well, the reaction has been amazing and supportive. After I published my book of poetry, I didn't tell anybody. I put it up,
Mm.
I published it, KDP, it went up on Amazon, on Ingram Spark, and I didn't say anything. And then a couple of days after I published it, I sent out the link to my parents and my brother and my sister-in-law. Only my immediate family knew. And my brother posted, because he didn't know, he posted on Facebook, "I'm so proud of my sister, the author," with the link. And it was the Band-Aid got ripped off. I was like, oh my, I hadn't expected it because there is a lot of imposter syndrome,
Right.
and so it took me a little bit. And then after that, to get comfortable with that. And then all of a sudden it was people were like, "I didn't know you wrote, and I didn't know you wrote." And even my college friends who were with me when I was working at the newspaper and printing my stuff in the literary journal, they were surprised because it'd been over 25 or whatever years. So that took some getting used to. Even I have 3 children's books published. Even with that, I didn't really feel like I could say I'm an author. It wasn't until I got my author copies of the Flanagan Girls and I opened that box and held that book in my hand. Not even my proof, because it was still in editing form, but when I held the completed, that I was like, wow, I did that.
Mm-hmm.
And that really was so cliche to say a dream come true, but it really was, because I proved to myself that I could write a novel.
Absolutely.
And honest, I could go back into it, and I'm sure there are mistakes we all miss in the, an of and a the and a period and a comma or whatever. And that's just life, because no matter how many eyes look at it, things go by us. And I'm sure I could have added more scenes to make it longer, but I'm really proud of the fact that I love the story. I'm so attached to the characters at this point, and I did it.
Absolutely. I know that is absolutely perfectly well said, Wendy. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the next question, which talks about of course, the accolades you have won, because as in your bio, you are an award-winning author, which is a huge, huge accomplishment. And this is another thing I've talked with a lot of authors as well who are also award-winning authors. This notion, and again, this stigmatism that it's so nasty to see, but it does exist. It's a sense of, authors who submit their works to these contests to see the just putting their foot in the door, just dipping their
Yeah.
toe in the water to see if they can do it. And this notion of like, oh, why do you have to submit a contest to get like gratification or recognition? A lot of us have never done contests, and
Yeah.
it's mainly not just to win, but it's just for the exposure and just to see,
Yeah.
can we go the distance? Can we, go to toe with other talented writers, regardless if you win or not? To just be say you were a finalist, that is a huge, huge
Yeah.
accomplishment.
Yeah.
But in the case of for you, Wendy, you did win those accolades. You did win those awards, which I imagine were like huge, like achievements and accomplishments, and just like eye openers. And I would just like to hear, the process of what motivated you to pursue these awards to apply in, and looking back, like how did that make you feel, not just as an author but just as a person as well who loves writing?
Yeah, it is a little validating, because sometimes you just like being invited to the party. I mean, let's be honest. Like I did the Nantucket Book Festival as part of their local author showcase, and there's Ellen Hildebrand and Ann Patchett, and they're up on the stage, and I'm back in the library with the little, the other local authors, and I'm so honored to just be invited to the party. I'm not in the main building with the big trad authors, and I'm fine with that, because I'm only 3.5 years into this, 3.5 years into this. So again, it's just nice to be included and be asked to be there. And as far as the awards, there's so much, and there's so many of the things you should do. You should do this as an indie author. You should do this, and you should do this, and you should do this. So when I started applying to the awards, and you're right, they do, the majority of them cost money.
Yes.
And as indie authors, we really have to figure out where we're going to allocate our funds, because it is a pay-to-play industry.
Yes.
And so for me, during that first year after the Flanagan Girls was published, I did start putting it into awards just to kind of be included and see, I don't know, where it fit and what kind of reception, and so and my children's books have won awards and stuff, and it is nice. And then you get to a point where it's like, okay, do I want to keep putting my money towards this, or do I want to, for me, I do a lot of author events and book fests, and that also is a fee.
Yes.
And I'm at the point now where, as nice as it is to win an award and to have your book chosen out of all of these books and all these amazing, talented writers, I needed to divert my attention because I wanted the exposure of being included at Book Fest. With that said, the Indie Author Project, if you haven't heard of it, look it up, because they're a phenomenal organization. Indie Author Project, the Flanagan Girls was voted runner-up for contemporary fiction. And I didn't win first place, but runner-up. That is an award that's voted on by librarians across the United States. So to have librarians vote my debut novel as a runner-up for contemporary fiction, that to me, I mean, my husband took a video of me watching the live feed of the announcement. I'm bawling my eyes out. Again, I'm so happy to just be included as one of the finalists, and then to come in, second place. I was so honored. And I mean, that alone is just because I grew up going to libraries. I grew up checking my books out, hanging out at the library, going through the card catalog to find the book, And so for me, that was like as good as like an Oscar or whatever you want to say, because that mattered, that librarians actually found my book worthy enough to, one, read, and two, to give it, the accolades it's received since then.
Absolutely. And that is huge. Again, huge accomplishment to you, Wendy. And also, yes, the Indie Author Project is a great organization. I actually enrolled all 4 of my books into their contest, which cannot wait to hear the results on when we get closer to November in honor of Indie Author Day, because I've never done contests before. I've never done any form like that. And I made a mission for at least this year to branch out and apply to others. But I think it's also important to note that as indie authors, and something that you mentioned before, Wendy, is for these contests, they look amazing and they're enticing. As a little forbearance for the listeners, especially for the aspiring writers and authors and also poets, do your research. Look into this contest and see if they are legit, because as you said, Wendy, this industry is, paid to play. And there are some contests that are shady, that are, not legitimate. So definitely do your research. Contact other authors who have, won awards, won accolades, saying, hey, have you heard of this contest? And see what they think. And definitely
There's so
your
many
research.
scammers. Yeah, there's so many people that are just trying to get the money. Don't pay for reviews. Don't pay for ARC readers. Don't pay to be promoted by someone on Instagram or whatever. Yeah, do your research on awards, because there's just a lot of scammers out there trying to get a buck from, indie authors that are just want to be seen, just want, that next thing that they think is going to be good for their career. But and it could very well be. Absolutely, having your book win an award is a beautiful thing, but you have to be, like you said, you have to vet to make sure that it's a legitimate company or a legitimate award, because there's just too many scammers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And now we go into this notion of what does it mean to be an indie author in the digital age. And I think we have touched on this a little bit because, as you mentioned, Wendy, we do have to be mindful of our funds. We do have to be mindful of, organizations. And as you said, we shouldn't pay for ARC reads, shouldn't pay for reviews or promos. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And for many of us, we're not marketers by trade. We don't know how to market our books. So we're just going with the flow and seeing what the algorithm says. And, social media is a double-edged sword. It could be a huge beneficial for us to, connect readers and build our communities, but we leave ourselves exposed to the darker sides. And unfortunately, our imposter syndrome and our writer's block gets heightened to a point that, in some cases, we may not want to write anymore, or we don't want to continue being writers. So ultimately, Wendy, my question to you is this: looking back on your career thus far, what has still disciplined you to stay true to yourself? What is your why, so to speak?
Joy. I never want to lose the joy of writing. I love to write. And even when I wasn't, obviously, these last few years publishing books, I was always writing because it's my outlet. It brings me joy. And I did get to a point, I would say last year, where I kind of took a pause and was like, realized I'm not going to curate my Instagram page so that it's all the same color theme, and nothing wrong with those authors that find joy in that and do, coordinate their feeds to have their images all the same color to match their branding. That's beautiful. That's not in my bandwidth. Social media is not my comfort zone. We do have to find our way to get comfortable with it. My newsletter is where I do end up writing more, but I never want to or do connect more with my readers, but I don't want to lose the joy of it. And there's so much noise for being an indie author. And what I mean by that is once you type the end, that is just the beginning of
Yeah.
all the other things. And I was actually at the Rhode Island Summer Book Fest a couple of weekends ago, and I was sitting next to a brand new author. She had just published her first book. She had this little website that she was still working on, and she didn't even have an author photo for it. She was using an avatar, and she's asking me a million questions. She's like, nobody told me any of this. And I'm like, I know. She's like, I thought I was good. I wrote a book. I'm like, I know. There's
Yeah.
so much other stuff. So for me, I don't want to get bogged down. I'd rather just be a grassroots kind of girl and grow my readerships authentically and find the readers that my books speak to so that I don't lose the joy of writing because I just love it so much.
Absolutely. Very, very true. And let's talk about the big elephant in the room, and that is, of course, AI in the
Yeah.
publishing industry. Because I've talked with this a lot on the show with other authors, and AI is going to be here. There's
Yep.
no way we can get rid
Yep.
of it. And to use it as a tool, we should use it as a
Mm-hmm.
tool. But generative AI
Yep.
definitely has no place in the publishing industry. But unfortunately, not everyone agrees with that. If you've been seeing social media and you've been seeing the trends, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have even gone forward in saying for those authors or those individuals who do create books using generative AI shouldn't say author by so and so. It should be programmed by so and
Mm-hmm.
so
Oh,
because
that's
you're not the
interesting. I haven't
author.
heard that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't heard that yet.
It
Yeah.
is very, very true. And unfortunately, the AI issue has now reached a new tier, for lack of better words, and that is, of course, the AI witch hunt. Now, for those who don't know what I'm referring
Wait,
to,
M dash. The
yes,
M
for those,
dash. Oh,
yeah, absolutely. For those who don't know what me or Wendy are referring to, there has been a growing concern within the author community, the indie author community, of fellow authors accusing other authors of using generative AI, whether it's, the language in the book or the artwork, specifically the artwork.
yeah.
And for people who don't use a company to make their covers, but hire an artist to do the cover for them, they unfortunately have also been accused of using generative AI, and it's gotten to a point where it's like, okay, this has to stop. Yes, it is important to bring awareness of generative AI,
Mm-hmm.
but if we do this, we're going to pretty much cause more turmoil for ourselves. So, Wendy, I would like to hear your thoughts on this issue within the publishing community.
Yeah, writing is my art form. So I, of course, am going to side with artistry. With that said, I'm with you as far as AI for assistive, not generative. Grammarly, there are so many AI for authors. I'm trying to think of, there's a bunch of all the different programs. Do you know what I
Pro
mean?
writing mate.
Pro writing. Thank you. That was another one I can think of. Yeah. Using it as assistive technology, that you're right. AI is never going to go away. Using it for assistive technology, I write chunky paragraphs because I talk in
Same.
circles. So I might throw a paragraph and say, does this sound chunky? Or am I missing a word or whatever? And, and the AI will come back and give me like 5 different paragraph versions. And I'm like, I don't want yours, just yes or no or whatever. But it'll show me that I'm chunky in ways that I could fix it. They're all my words. That kind of thing. The M dash gets me because I would never use it for generative just because writing is my artistry and I love to write. And I would hope others that are writing to put stories out there, I hope they would see it as that and not just using it as a way to make a buck, because you're not going to make a buck. Come on, give me a break.
Yes.
This isn't art. We're starving artists over here in the indie
Yes.
industry. But and and to take away, I have an amazing cover designer. I love her. She has done all my covers. She helped me create my brand. It goes back to, we're in a pay to play industry. So where do you want to allocate your funds? Put it to a cover artist. If you're an artist and you can do it in Canva, or you can, great, fantastic, yay for you. That's not my strength. So I have a cover artist, find a good copy editor, I have an amazing editor. My editor on my first book taught me how to use an M-dash versus ellipses. That's how I know how to use them. That's why I use them. And now I'm afraid to use them because of the stigma. Like I wrote a newsletter, and always have my husband proofread my newsletters before I send them out. And I had a couple of M dashes. He's like, that looks AI. I go, why? He goes, because of the M dash. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I took them out,
Yeah.
but you're right. It's not going to go away, just hopefully. Is there an answer, Gabriel? I don't even know. It's so hard. As I just say, don't, I'm a big supporter of, I don't want to say a big supporter, but I have no problem with AI for assistive. Generative makes me cringe.
Yes. Well said, Wendy. Well said. And now, shifting gears, we're now going to talk about my favorite segment of the author interview, the business side of being an author. Now, Wendy, I have a little icebreaker for this question. When you began, your career as an author and, started writing your books, writing your poetry, how did you go about marketing them initially? And now looking back, especially also with the Flanagan girls, as well as now the release of the second book, is there anything that you wish you've done differently?
Oh my gosh, there's so many, but I don't know that I would be where I am without all of that trial and error.
Mm,
Um, I didn't know what I was doing with Flanagan Girls. I didn't know how to market it. I just threw it up on Amazon. I didn't know about, doing promos and running ads. I didn't know about written word media or book funnel. Um, I didn't know about scheduling out social media posts. Uh,
same.
so I didn't know about doing local events and really getting yourself out there. I mean, the best thing I think for promoting myself that I've done is we have an amazing author community in Connecticut. We have tons of author events, book fests. We have a beautifully supportive reader writer community. And I'm fortunate to do a lot of events in person and meet people in person and make those personal connections. And that's where I feel like you're going to gain your readership that's going to follow you along from book to book, is making those personal connections. And at the same time, I started setting goals for myself the second year. And my goal was to write a book. I want to put out a book a year because I know I can take my time to do my research, to do my interviews, to
Same.
plot it out, to do all my revisions. So a book a year, that's my bandwidth. I can put out a quality piece of work. And then it was grow my newsletter subscribers. So I use BookFunnel and I use written word media to run promos. So again, where are you allocating your funds? Part of my funds. I just started Facebook ads this month. I'm still don't really know what I'm doing. We'll see. But for marketing, it really just, you got to figure what feels true for you. I tried the TikTok, and then my children told me, Mom, if you're going to call it the TikTok, then you don't know what you're doing. You need to get off TikTok if you're calling it the TikTok. It's not my comfort zone. It's not what I'm comfortable. I like Instagram. I love
Same.
the Bookstagram community because I was a reader before I was a writer. So
Yes.
that's my community. And that, I think, is the number one marketing tool that you can have, is find your community and grow and branch out from that community.
Absolutely 100%. And even looking back at my own community as, an author, as the Wandering Scribe. I mean, a lot of people know me as the Wandering Scribe. If, in fact, if you typed up my name, and it has to be like my name, Gabriel Garcia, the Wandering Scribe, you'll see my interviews and my website. But there is someone who is before. I don't think they have the name now. They were called the Wandering Scribe back in the day. So I had to make sure to have like my name in front of it to like show
Mm,
a difference, which is, it's been a long process. It's been like an arduous process because
yeah.
start off doing, audio, now doing video, and growing my Instagram to, promote my books. I
Yeah.
wasn't really a tech savvy person growing up. I didn't use Facebook, didn't use Twitter or X now. And I only made Instagram to follow like my friends who were using it. But realizing as my career was progressing as an author, realized, okay, I need to use this account for something. And then boom, that's to start a way to just grow. And Instagram is my predominant form of communication
Yeah.
with everybody. I
Me
mean, that's
too.
where I
Yeah.
get a lot of my authors are from the Instagram indie
Hmm.
community. And it's been a very, very great thing. And, networking with these people, I've learned so much. Which brings into this other question of, the business side is who are we writing for? And for us as authors, you mean Wendy, we write for ourselves. We know the books better than anyone else. But when we publish, that's when we have to consider, okay,
Yeah.
we've written the book. Who exactly are we writing this for, and what genre does it fall under? Because you don't want to make a book that already exists, that someone already has written, and B, you don't want to write a book that's so new that it's going to confuse people. You have to find that sweet equilibrium.
Yes. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Because readers, as I'm sure you'll definitely agree, Wendy, have expectations of how certain
Hmm.
books are supposed to end or begin, depending on the genre. So, for the Flanagan Girls in particular, how did you find that equilibrium, that balance between your individuality and your voice as an author, but also being mindful of the genre that you are writing in?
I think because I write stories about the human experience and the stages of life, I think my books are very relatable. I write in women's fiction, and so the stories I write are definitely the stages of life that we go through as women. And so I think that it's very relatable. All of my characters I've written, so you when you read my book, I think everyone is gonna see themselves in one of my characters, whether they
Hmm.
experienced that, whether they related to that relationship, they had that relationship. I've gotten the most amazing emails from some of my readers. I have a reader, 64-year-old woman, who emailed me after reading the Flanagan Girls and said, I was Claire. I was her. I had the hardest time asking for help for so long. And I wish I could go back and tell that younger me, to be braver. And so that kind of connection that a 64-year-old woman had with my 34-year-old character, that she saw a younger version of herself, that motivates me to continue writing these rich, flawed characters
Right.
who are just living life. And that's what speaks to me, and to share out in the world. And honestly, and you know this as a writer, at a point, you get to a point, especially in a story, where the characters take over and you're just
Hmm.
the conduit. And you don't really, they just start talking and you're like, I'm typing as fast as I can. Um, so I think that's part of my reader's experience, is seeing themselves in the characters.
Very true. Very, very true. Now, this is another fan question that I often get asked a lot by a lot of people who watch my show and also message me privately. And I love asking authors this because I really like to see like their answers and also who they are beyond their respective genres. Because we as authors don't want to be checkbox or pigeonholed into
Hmm.
one style of writing. Now, for you, Wendy, this fan question asks, what other genre or style of writing that you would like to experiment in and potentially publish a new book under?
I would either want to do a cozy mystery or a thriller.
Ooh,
Yes.
nice.
So I have written short stories, and I have a short story written that's a psychological thriller that I think I would love to expand into a full book.
Same
I
here.
have the book, the final book in the trilogy to write. And then I have one other book that's sitting, who's the main character keeps talking to me. And I'm like, hold off, Marin, I'm not ready for you yet. But I would love to write. Yeah. Cozy mystery, I think, sounds intriguing, but psychological thriller just sounds so juicy and fun that, yeah, I think I would like to try that eventually.
Nice. Very,
Yeah.
very nice. Now, we're almost near the end of this amazing author interview, Wendy. I do have a few last questions I do want to ask you. So, this next question is again kind of more of like a personal question, but I think it's very cool to ask this. And it's the notion of, what were the books or authors that really inspired you growing up? And have they in some way imprinted themselves on how you approach writing?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've always been a reader. I mean, I grew up on Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary, and then it was, through high, and then I went into the Sweet Valley High series, but then at the same time, I went through a Stephen King phase, and then I got into Mary Higgins Clark, and I kind of just took the hand-me-down books that I could get, or, the books at the library. Stephen King on writing changed my life. I got that book at a thrift store, I don't know, a few years back or whatever. And I was like, yes, and yes, and yes. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. So he intrigues me. Again, that's not my genre, but the way he is able to craft those stories fascinates me. The way his mind work fascinates me. There are certain, but then you get, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on his last name? Levi, Theo of Golden. Gosh, I can't think of his first. Sorry, I have it right behind me. Alan Levy. Levi. He's a modern day. He's an indie author that went trad because he wrote a beautiful story, and that inspires me too. Where you just hear about a guy that was retired lawyer that was a songwriter that wanted to prove that he could write a novel just like I did, and he wrote a beautiful story. Any good storytelling, but I grew up on Little Women, The Secret Garden, those, Pride and Prejudice. I grew up on these tales, so I love a good story. I like a good tale. I'm not into fantasy or that, but I love anyone that can create those depths and those worlds that really suck you in. So I don't know. It's hard to describe because I'm a little all over the place, but yeah, a good story always sucks me in. And there are just certain authors that are craftsmen at it.
Absolutely. And speaking of authors, I know you mentioned earlier, your friends and family have been huge supporters, as well as the people you've worked with, your editors and your cover artists. But are there any other authors that you have collaborated with or may have met either in person or virtual that have also been big help to you in your career as well?
Yeah, like I said, we have a beautiful community here in Connecticut. Jack Matthews, who writes us like international mystery books. He was my mentor. I went to my first meeting for the Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association before I even published my poetry book. And he was like, okay, let me tell you, I got you. Don't worry. And he kind of took me under his wing. And then from there it grew. And Gabby Coatsworth, who wrote Cozy Mysteries, she's here in Connecticut. And she's always ready on the other receiving end of an email with advice and stuff. Janaea Hernandez that writes cross genres like I do. There's just, oh my gosh, there's so many. Heidi Roca is a children's author, and Sharon Duquette, and there's just a lot of amazing authors within the state of Connecticut that really support each other. Peter Marzano is a phenomenal historic fiction writer. I went to his author talk on Monday and I was blown away to the point where I'm like, okay, now I need to go back to high school history. I want to know everything, you know, just by the way he shared his research. So yeah, there's a lot of authors locally that have really guided and supported me, as well as I'm a member of the Women's Fiction Writers Association and the WFWA. They have live writing sessions 2 to 3 days a week, 90-minute blocks. In those group of women, we all log on and we set our intention for the 90 minutes and we all do something. We could be writing, plotting and scheming, business, marketing, working in Canva. You know, we all have a different goal for our time, but we're holding space for each other. And then when the 90 minutes is up, we all do a check-in, like, how did it go for you? And some days it's like, I didn't do that great. And that's okay, you know, but it's just having, again, going back to that community. That's amazing. And yeah, my WFWA writing community they've really helped me get outside of my close-knit Connecticut community, which is
Excellent.
helped.
Excellent, Wendy. Excellent indeed. And now we arrive at the final two questions of this amazing author interview. Now, we've talked about a lot of stuff in this interview. So ultimately, at the end of the day, what do you hope the listeners and viewers will take away from not just your books, but also your journey as an author? And secondly, as almost like that teacher, what is your word of wisdom to fellow authors and writers listening and or watching this interview right now?
Oh, that was a lot. I hope I can remember it all. I'm in my third career. And as I told my children when they went off to college and had to choose a major, you're not stuck. You can shift. You can change. I did not expect, I thought I was going to retire as a teacher. Unfortunately, my medical condition didn't make that a possibility. And now I fulfilled the dream that I didn't know that I would, or I didn't think was possible, whether it was at the time I didn't believe in myself enough to think that I could do it, or the opportunity hadn't presented itself enough yet for me to be able to become a published author and novelist. But you're not stuck. So whatever you want to do with your one wild and precious life, go do it. And I always say, you know, embrace the journey. You never know where it's going to lead. And we don't know where life's going to lead us. So you just got to embrace it. And the final, and I feel so like I'm saying all these little cliche things, but it's really the truth is what you're going to do, as Mary Oliver says, what will you do with this one wild and precious life? Whatever brings you joy, do that. Because why do things that don't bring you joy anymore? And that's where I've been with my author career, where there are certain things that if it doesn't bring me joy, I don't need to. I don't need to do that. And so why put myself through the agony of doing all of that if it doesn't make me happy? Does that make sense? Did I answer your question? I felt like I just talked in cliches, but
no, but I think it is, you know, very, very well said and very poetic of Wendy as a final capping to this incredible author interview. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this amazing episode here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to Wendy for coming on the show, making her official debut and hopefully not the last. Wendy, where can people find you on social media if they wanted to reach out and connect? as well as buy a copy or two of your books? And will you be doing any in-person events to promote?
Yes, I have a lot actually going on. I will be at the this weekend, or I don't know when this is airing, but I'll be at the Manchester Book Walk or the Old Weathersfield Book Walk. Sorry, Manchester's in the fall. I'm at Barnes and Noble in Canton, Connecticut, doing in-person author signing. I'll be at the Fall into Love in Massachusetts this fall, the Manchester Book Fest. I have a lot. You can find it all on my website because I've been doing like a summer book tour for my new release. So I've got a lot of things planned. As well as Romanticon and the book ball up in New Hampshire. So there's a lot of things. But yeah, you can find me on my website, wendyhallerauthor.com. Like I said, Instagram is my social media jam. Wendy Haller Author there, and then the same on Facebook as Wendy Haller Author. I don't really use the TikTok, but I do have an account there. So yeah, absolutely. Check out my books. They're on Amazon and all the other places you can find them, Barnes and Noble, BookBub. You can look it up, bookshop.org. Always support indie. And yeah, thank you, Gabriel, for having me. It has been so much fun chatting with you.
Absolutely. The feeling is mutual, Wendy. And I will provide all those links down below in the description of this video. And if you'd like to see Wendy back on the show for a follow-up interview or for an episode of the Writers Hub, or better yet, if you would like to see Wendy in a future roundtable episode later this year, you know what you have to do. Like this video, comment, and subscribe
Please.
to the channel. And if I get enough votes, enough comments, I will make it happen. Until next time, everybody, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you all next time.